Welcome everyone. Sam Leary here. Today I am talking about my starter guide to UX writing, specifically the 9 best factors to help you learn UX writing online. So for those that don't know, my name is again Sam Leary, and I make YouTube videos for folks who are interested in learning how they can leverage UX writing to increase their personal, professional, and entrepreneurial opportunities. So I love talking about UX writing because as a writer myself, as somebody who came from the humanities, I went through undergrad and I went to graduate school studying creative writing. So it's something I'm well versed in from a subject point of view, but I didn't necessarily feel empowered to make the transition to the professional world, given that I, went the humanities route in school. So I think there are a lot of people who feel similarly, who don't necessarily know how to make that transition, and I want to make it easier by teaching you how you can pad your resume with the most valuable, the most in-demand form of writing on the market right now, at least in terms of professional markets. So let's talk about the fact of the day. 48% of Americans read at or above an 8th grade level, which means for those of you keeping score at home, 52% of Americans read below an 8th grade level. That is one of the many reasons why UX writing is so important. Now let's look at the right side of this slide. So this is a 404 page that I really like. It's from Disney's website. At the time of this video's recording, this is what their 404 page looks like. So we're going to dissect it a little bit, and then going forward, we'll talk about several different examples and then have you on your way. So what do we see here? This is actually a video. Initially, when you land on the 404 page, you just see 404 and then this character's head comes through. Unfortunately, I don't know the lore behind either of the characters on this screen. So, go easy on me in the comments if you choose to educate me. But my point is simply that it's engaging, the UX writing is good, and I'm going to explain why. So let's see. You end up on this 404 page. It says, you didn't break the internet, but we can't find what you're looking for. What can knows more help you find today? And then there's a search bar. So why does this work well? It works well because, again, as we've talked about in other videos, if you saw my previous video or the video before that, you know that when you land on a 404 page, typically the user that lands on a 404 page is not pleased. They're not excited to be there. It's not where they want to be. So the approach that the UX writer should take in that given scenario is one that is empathetic toward a user that is frustrated by the fact that they landed on a 404 page. And we get that here. It comes through in the voice, in the tone, and how the page is structured. It's simple, it's engaging, and it's likely to help get the user back to where they want to go. I think the search bar is a great touch. Rather than having to, click the back button or the exit button, the user could just type in a keyword that describes where they want to go. So I really like this 404 page. It's an example in my mind of great UX writing, and you can bet your bottom dollar that Disney has a team of UX writers working on this. But that covers that. So let's talk about today's lesson plan. So the quote I want to build today's video around is a Benjamin Franklin quote. So tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn. So this is the project of my channel. I'm trying to involve writers, involve thinkers as much as possible, because in my experience, again, just to revisit this quote quickly, involvement is important. Just learning, just sitting in a chair, just reading, just listening is not going to get you where you need to go. I'm trying to give you the tools that you need to actually involve yourself and engage yourself, which brings me to my free UX writing guide. You can visit samleary.com. I'll talk more about this shortly. Visit samleary.com, join my newsletter, and you will get a free copy of my UX writing guide. So this is going to walk you through basically everything you need to know to at least put UX writing on your resume. You don't have to do that much with peace and love. I don't mean to offend the more professional UX writers out there. I'm a small business owner myself. I practice UX writing on a daily basis, and I think that with a not insignificant amount of effort, you can add the skill to your resume justifiably. So let's talk about these 9 factors because they are important, and I think once you have these ideas in your mind, you're going to be able to seek out answers that are going to help streamline your UX writing learning process. So there's relevance, clarity and simplicity, structure and organization, visual appeal, real world examples, practice tools and resources, expertise, authority, and trust, which are typically like more SEO associated terms, but I think they're relevant here, which is why I want to talk about them. And then accessibility and updated information. So that's a quick run through. And let's go to the next slide. So if this is helpful, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe on my video. As I said before, I invite you to also download my free UX writing guide at samleary.com. It's just under 20 pages, and I am going to continue to add to it as these videos go on. Again, my goal is to help empower you. I want to increase your personal, professional, and entrepreneurial opportunities by teaching you about the most valuable, most in-demand, highest paid form of writing on the market today. That is UX writing. Me personally, like I said, I'm a small business owner. I went the humanities route through college. I did not feel prepared to transition to professional environments, to entrepreneurial spaces. And it was really because of my education in writing that I was able to. So now I want to help communicate what I've learned to you. So if any of this is helpful, like, comment, subscribe, visit the website, get the starter guide, the free UX writing guide. So relevance, let's talk about it. So first and foremost, the quote on this page, writing to me is simply thinking through my fingers. Isaac Asimov, writer and biochemistry professor. So maybe you know who he is, maybe you don't, not super important. The point is thinking through your fingers. The idea, I love that idea because there's something that is not like you don't actually think through your fingers. I don't have to communicate that to you. There's just some sort of so much of UX writing, as I've said in other videos, is about empathizing with your users and understanding what their needs are when they arrive in a given experience, be it a website, an application, or some other digital product. And I think there's an idea, some portion of that idea lives in this quote, the idea of thinking through your fingers, of empathizing. So that's why I want to build this slide around that quote. If you look at this image in particular, it is from Tesla.com, their solar panels. So one of the points is that there's not one set way to organize a page, to organize an experience. It depends in large part on your users and what their expectations are and what their needs are. So I like this page, which details, I believe it's on Tesla.com's homepage. It's like the third or fourth section down, at least at the time of this video's recording when you're scrolling. And I like it because it takes what I consider to be a non-traditional approach to web design, at least the desktop format. But it's very clean, it makes sense, and the user can easily understand everything that they see here. The content cascades in a way that is done really well, that's really clean, to use the word again. The call to action is clearly labeled, and the product is well labeled. So design, sleek, and durable. And then we see different elements over here. We have the chat function in the far right and the order now button, as well as learn more. So I just think it's organized in a way that is appealing. There's no problem with the content, the written content at least, clashing with the visual elements of the page. And that's really that. That's why I chose this. It's a non-traditional way of organizing. But let's talk about relevance now. So creating content to meet the needs of an audience and address their specific pain points, challenges, or goals. So relevance. There's target audience needs, there's actionable insights, and there's goal-oriented content. And it all, I think, is on display in this example that I pulled from Tesla.com. So relevance is important to UX writing because you need to tailor the information that you have to offer your user. You need to tailor it to their specific needs, to their pain points. You need to understand that your audience has wants, needs, they have problems and pain points, and that's why they end up on your website. Even if somebody is just landing on your a website or downloading an app to be entertained, at the bottom of that is still a quote-unquote pain point or problem that should be addressed, and the content has to go hand in hand with those with those problems. It needs to address the problems, because otherwise the user is just going to bounce. They're going to close the app. They're going to close the website, turn off the digital product, whatever the right formulation is. UX writing should address their needs directly by providing solutions. If you land on Tesla.com and you're interested in looking at solar panels, you don't want the website beating around the bush. You don't need to see 1,000 different photos necessarily. Tesla gives you a design. They designed this section in a way where it's easily skimmable. If you're just trying to skim quickly, we see low portfolio, concealed edge. So it's just communicating information very quickly to the user. If you're interested in a solar panel, this is what you need to see. And you're either ordering now or you're not. You're on your way to whatever it is that you're scrolling through Tesla's website to find. In terms of actionable insights, you want to offer clear information that is actionable and relevant. We have this clearly labeled call to action, the order now, and a learn more button in case somebody isn't convinced. Both of those, everything here is kind of working toward that point. Beyond that, though, you want to make the digital experience intuitive, and I think it's pretty intuitive. It's effectively, this section is divided into 2 parts. It looks like it's divided into thirds. Math's not my strong suit. I'm struggling to eyeball that. Regardless, making the digital experience intuitive. The user likely knows where to click. You can figure it out. This is clearly the order now button. It's a simple call to action. It's clearly defined at the bottom of the page. I'm not sure if you can see it because of the white coloring, but there's a little breadcrumb action going on the side to signal to the user that you're moving down the page. You're on like the 3rd or 4th section. So it's just a way of making sure that the user understands their position in the experience. So you also want to use words to direct user engagement. Order now, learn more, minimizing the possibility for ambiguities to cause the sort of friction that is going to prevent the user from taking the action that would solve their problem. And to that end, you're keeping the user from being frustrated. Goal-oriented content. So really, what I've said before in other videos is that the goal for UX writers is to align content with the user's needs, and in that way they help businesses and organizations achieve their goals. But understanding real wants and real needs and then addressing those real wants and needs is really difficult. And in future videos we're going to talk about processes that are going to help you actually identify and address them. But for now, it's important to understand that goal-oriented content is deceptively complicated. It's like a single term, but it goes well beyond that. So you also want to help users complete tasks. You want them to find information and make decisions. So if a user is interested in just trying to understand the basics of Tesla solar panels, you see that the design is sleek and durable. You get some product features over here. If you're interested in reading more, there's a little paragraph blurb that doesn't occupy so much white space that it's intimidating. And then at the bottom, you have the opportunity to click learn more or to order now. And to that end, you are helping the user complete tasks, find information, and consequently make decisions. So next up is clarity and simplicity, and this really brings me to, back to the quote that I started today's video with, which is that 52% of Americans read below an 8th grade level. So that's one of the many reasons why UX writers are so important, why the field is growing, and quite frankly, why they, get paid what they do for, just writing content, basically. So using plain language that is accessible or easily understandable, to put it in different terms, that's accessible, has clear headings, and has concise explanations. So that is kind of how I think of clarity and simplicity. I love talking about information architecture and kind of the logical manner in which content should cascade. We'll talk more about information architecture in future videos. There are a lot of models that I could talk about for a very long time, and I'm already doing a lot of talking in this video. So not happening now, but plain language, clear headings, concise explanations. You want to make sure that the language you're using is accessible. Common language that's relatively easy to understand. One thing that is always helpful to keep in the back of your mind when you're writing or speaking is, how likely is it that my words could be perceived by somebody who not even, can't read at an 8th grade level, but whose primary language might not be English? How accessible are the words that I'm using? Simplify technical jargon and complex terminology. Figure out how to bend the words, how to reorganize the phrasings so that the information that you're communicating is done so in a way that is common, so to speak, that isn't, anything too lofty. And conversational tones to make content more engaging. To call back to the Disney example I used, you didn't break the internet. It's fun. It's a conversational tone. It's the kind of thing you might say to a friend. At least that's my interpretation of it. Maybe you have a different interpretation. Clear headings, additionally, break up content with headings that guide the reader. Skimmability, readability. Having clear headings helps with both of those. You want to also be descriptive, accurate, and honest in your clear headings. You want to, there's a constant dialogue between the headings and the descriptive text. They inform each other, and ensuring that, it's the right level of descriptive and accurate and honest. There's this sweet spot where you're kind of walking a tightrope to ensure that content is, all three of those. Additionally, there's this visual element. I have a misplaced semicolon in here, but visually ensuring headings are distinct and easily identifiable. I've talked in previous videos about when I was at Johns Hopkins. That's where I did my MFA. I taught undergraduate reading, writing, and digital media courses there. Ensuring headings are distinct and easily identifiable, anytime I think about the visual element, the visual aspect of UX writing, I think back to my time at Hopkins. I was a fiction writer there, but I had the opportunity to learn from a lot of incredible poets. And one of the things I came to appreciate during my time at Hopkins was the extent to which the written word is a visual experience. As a fiction writer, I always thought about writing as something that was very happened in my mind exclusively and was very cerebral, but really the way that words appear on the page, if we're talking about a novel that has, maybe a single block of text, it's one paragraph all the way down. You can imagine, turning that page, seeing a monstrosity of a block of text and kind of being dissuaded from wanting to read. Whereas, if you see very short lines, a lot of dialogue, there's something about the pace that it just seems to pick up, and surely you are turning the page faster simply because there's fewer words. My point is simply that one of the reasons why I'm so interested in UX writing is because it really emphasizes the visual, how important it is to pay attention to the way words look in an experience, which I'll talk more about as we visit more examples. Concise explanations also. Nobody comes to your website, application, or digital product to spend time reading, to meditate on the words that you're using. I have worked with plenty of clients who feel the opposite, and at some point you can't really convince them otherwise, but the reality of the situation is you want to be short and to the point. Don't waste too much time segmenting information into skimmable parts and really trimming the fat, to use the phrase, so that things are as skimmable and as readable as possible. And especially you want to minimize repetition and unnecessary words. So that covers clarity and simplicity, why they're important. This is, I could talk about this for a very long time. 52% of Americans reading under an 8th grade level means that, in a world where digital experiences are becoming increasingly popular, writers have to continually put in more work to ensure that their content is accessible to the widest audience possible. Because, let's say for a given digital product, your target market nationally or globally, let's say, consists of, I don't know, let's say 10 million people. But if you write content that is inaccessible to a majority of your audience, suddenly you have the number of people that you're able to connect with. So that's why clarity and simplicity is so important. On to the next, structure and organization. So create a logical flow of information, making it easy to navigate and understand. There's logical flow, there's content hierarchy, and there's navigational aids. I really like, honestly, I don't really like it, but I feel like it kind of proves the points that I'm getting at. There's a logical flow to this page, from the navigation bar to the spring sale to the hero section, the call to action button that's blue unlike anything else on the page, this weird purple bubble which kind of in a weird way centers or draws your eye to the center. These navigational elements, to allow for scrolling, and then the use of icons to help limit the amount of text on the page. All of that makes the Microsoft's homepage increasingly more accessible. And I know for a fact that there's no shortage of UX writers on Microsoft's payroll. But let's talk about logical flow. So determine the purpose of your content and create an outline. That's the first thing to do. That's again in the realm of informational architecture, but figuring out what's the purpose and then working backwards from the purpose. So you want to organize your content to be convenient for your ideal users. So Microsoft is it's simple, it's to the point, save up to $300 on select Surface Pro 9. So we get the opportunity to save, the cost, and the product name. And if you look at the bottom where we see different icons being used, shop surface devices, choose your Microsoft 360, buy Xbox games and consoles. It's all product oriented. There's no fluff. It's designed to move a user through the experience, get them to where they want to go in a way that minimizes friction. So transitional phrases, therefore, but, etc. The transitional phrase we see here is new season, new savings. So it's not necessarily a transitional phrase, I guess, insofar as we might think of a transitional phrase as therefore or but or then or something like that. But, it's just a way of kind of getting the user into the beginning of the sentence. That comma that comes 2 words in is doing a lot of work to just segment the content and make it a little easier to chew, a little more palatable. Might be a more complicated explanation, so if you have questions, just let me know. I'm happy to answer them in the comments. Content hierarchy. Establish a clear hierarchy of information for ideal user personas. I could talk about ideal user personas all day long. I won't. But really what it has to do is, again, informational architecture. You want to iterate headings and subheadings, understand, what is the big idea and how can we segment that out into different subtopics, let's say. So formatting elements, bold, italics, bullet points, size, links, etc. Think about the way that Microsoft is using color here, be it, black text or like kind of gray text. We see white text, we see a blue button, green, the way they're using green and purple. So all of these different visual elements that are working to help the user more intuitively understand the hierarchy of information that's before them. Additionally, we have navigation aids. So obviously there's the navigation bar, the header, which is, it utilizes icons and single words whenever possible. If nothing else, it's never more than 2 words. But menus, hyperlinks, and breadcrumbs. So in if you'll think back 2 slides before to the Tesla example, the way that they used breadcrumbs was really intuitive. Right on the left side of the screen, as you scroll, you understand, okay, I'm in section 3 now. That's, I think, what the solar panel section was, if I'm remembering correctly. But, as you scroll, making sure that there's some way that the user can kind of understand where they are in the experience to ensure that they, if you know where you are, it's much easier to figure out where you're going. Iterate calls to action for clarity. So shop Surface Pro 9. Nothing super complicated about that, but I am willing to bet that if you were in the writer's room, if you were, in the design process as this was all being drawn up, they do not just write one call to action and slap it on the homepage of a multi-billion-dollar corporation's website. So a lot of iterating. And if you can set up processes to iterate, that's really one way to set yourself apart from, some other forms of copywriters, let's say, or I should say other forms of writers for copy. And then knowing when to use a search bar, I'm trying to think. So the Disney 404 page we looked at had a search bar, right? I don't believe Tesla's did. Microsoft has it up here. It's small. It takes up very little space, but they use an icon to help it to help the user identify where exactly it is. And I think that's really well done, because how many products does Microsoft have? What if I land here and I'm not looking for a Surface device or Microsoft 365 or an Xbox or Windows 11? What if I'm looking for some small product, or just a product that isn't clearly labeled, that doesn't fit into any one of these categories? The search function is going to be very, very valuable. And typically that's when you want to use a search bar. So that'll give you some idea of structure and organization, what role it plays in experiences, and how it can inform your learning process as you set out to learn UX writing. Visual appeal. We've kind of already touched on this, but we're going to dig in even further on visual appeal, because if you are trying to learn UX writing, it is so important. So visual appeal enhances the overall user experience, making the content more engaging and memorable. If content is engaging and it's memorable, that's how you build brand loyalty. That's how you build trust. So layout design, relevant images and illustrations, ideally those which create some sort of emotional response in your user. And then effective use of white space, which kind of brings me back to what I said previously about poetry. So let's talk about layout design. Consistency in typography, colors, design, voice, brand, and more. Organization, outlines, different prototypes. That's how you find the right organization. You have to prototype. You have to draft. Because you're save time, energy, and money. So in your organization, that's why iterating is so important. And eventually, in a future video, we'll get to a full walkthrough of my process where you actually can see me doing it. But for now, we're just talking about it. Visual hierarchy. Emphasize important info. If we look at this board panda from the article 35 examples of great UX writing to spark inspiration from UX Writing Hub. Again, really recommend UX Writing Hub. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. Not like they're sponsoring me, although that would be very cool, but not happening right now. I just think this is a good article, gives a lot of good examples, and I like this. Visual hierarchy, emphasize important info. Like what you're seeing? Let's keep in touch, and we'll send more your way. Add your email address. There's very little opportunity. I imagine there are people who could still see this and not know where they are or where they're going or what they need to do next. But really, I think we can safely say it's pretty straightforward. Relevant images and illustrations. I mean, look at the illustration here, the image here. This the panda. I wouldn't necessarily describe this panda as bored. He looks pretty excited, which maybe that's the point. But images that enhance the understanding of the content. The panda appears to be looking down. And I think that just kind of moves the user's eye and it gets them deeper into the experience. So using visual elements to simplify communication, to reduce friction as the information is being communicated to the user, and then optimizing image size and placement. Look at where this sits. The little panda's elbows are hanging over the edge. I just think it's really well done, from placement to the use of the element. And then the decision to, kind of use a panda that is recognizably a panda, but very branded as well. Effective use of white space. White space is important. White space, white space, white space. At Johns Hopkins, the writing seminars, I again, poetry, I really learned to appreciate the ways in which writers can use white space to facilitate an emotional connection between like the reader and the text. But I would say in UX writing, to facilitate engagement is really what it's all about. Frictionless engagement, a visual balance, harmony. You know, the heading, your eye is drawn to the heading, and from the heading it moves down to the supporting text, and from the supporting text it moves to the specific form field to fill out. And in that way, your eye is moving down. I just think that the content cascades in a way that is really well done. And that all being said, it is readable, it is skimmable, and in that way it is user centric. So it's clean and uncluttered as well. It's all working nicely here. I bet there is no shortage of email signups, which reminds me, if you have not signed up yet, visit samleary.com, where you can get my free UX writing guide when you sign up for my weekly newsletter, Wordwise. Okay, on to the next. So real world examples. If you're trying to learn UX writing, you're going to need to study real world examples. That's in large part what I'm trying to do with these videos to help make that process easier for you. I really recommend studying the A players, because a lot of times that's where, at this time, so the field is relatively new. It's a little more, UX writing is a little more than a decade old. Early 2010s is really when it became popularized, as I've said in previous videos. As the field grows, you will see what would you say? You'll see more UX writers working for, not just the A companies. I'm thinking Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, the front runners in the space. You'll see, smaller businesses, obviously the large ones, medium, small sized businesses. And as that continues to happen, if you're studying real world examples right now, you are going to be better positioned to apply the lessons that, $1 million budgets are paying for now, so that you can generate an income for yourself to increase your income, be it, an entrepreneurial pursuit or a professional opportunity. So let's look at this. This is from Apple.com, their Apple AirPods. Charge wirelessly, use tirelessly. Like, it's a rhyme, it works, it's fun, it's musical, importantly, which I don't think is a coincidence considering the product that's being communicated to us. And then I don't have to read the supporting text, that's not important. Really what we want to pay attention to here is, how is the content organized? It's centered, okay? And it cascades in a way that is like triangular. It's like a funnel downward, which I think generally speaking is like what you want to do. And it is directing the eye toward the product and getting the user to scroll, to engage, to stay on the page a little longer. So make the content relatable and applicable to real life scenarios, enhancing engagement and understanding. So visiting, popular websites, looking at, seeking out real world examples and thinking, why does that work? Why did they make this design decision? There are definitely some times where the design decision that you'll find will not make sense, but I would say the overwhelming majority of the time, it's going to make sense, because there are a lot of people who get paid a lot of money to make sure that it makes sense. So again, like I said, study the A players. Research impacts how different design decisions impact conversion rates. When I first learned UX writing, obviously I had a writing background, but I wasn't super familiar with UX writing. The doorway to UX writing for me was on the other side of the doorway to UX design. And when I really started to learn to appreciate how different design decisions have a significant impact on conversion rates, which directly contributes to whether or not a business or organization is generating revenue via their digital presence. Because realistically, user engagement, user satisfaction, and overall error reduction, which I think goes hand in hand with like user frustration, it's all tightly connected. And when you visit real world examples of, obviously from a design standpoint, different websites, but also case studies. You can find plenty of UX writing case studies out there. You get a deeper understanding of, the lessons, the rules of UX writing. And if we go all the way back, just going to skip to the Ben Franklin quote. Tell me and I forget, Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn. So by looking at all of these different, by looking at examples, be they case studies or actual designs, that's one way that you can begin to involve yourself. And I would go as far as to say, you can use a free tool like Figma. Canva is maybe an easier, more accessible option for those new to design, to recreate some of the things that you like and kind of begin to work through the process of actually designing an experience that is engaging, that satisfies, but that follows the best practices that some of the industry experts, execute on, deliver. That's really what I'm talking about here, is leveraging those real world examples in a way that's going to benefit you. So industry specific scenarios, understanding how, depending on the industry, like e-commerce, you're going to want to write differently than healthcare, than gaming. There are going to be different expectations for the text that the user is likely to find there. So for e-commerce, it's a significant amount of the text is going to be dedicated to descriptions, to forms, and it's going to contribute directly to sales. For healthcare related experiences, there's complex knowledge that has to be communicated in a way that is accessible to a wide variety of users, and there's you need to adhere to different rules, different best practices. Healthcare especially. Gaming, words are important in any experience, but gaming, the expectation, different than healthcare, different than e-commerce. I would say gaming tends to be a little more intuitive, so the words need to not get in the way. The words need to be conscious that the user is involved in the experience in a way where they, just aren't, if we're talking about, being on a healthcare website or on an e-commerce platform, what have you. So hopefully that makes sense. I know that those examples might be a bit more complicated, but if you have a question, leave me a comment and I will respond. So practical applications. So there's like easy, medium, and hard. So, an easy practical application would be like write or iterate error messages to help users troubleshoot. So do a quick Google search, error messages, and find 10 different examples and try to improve on each of them. That would be one of my recommendations if you're serious about figuring out how to learn. Or you could leverage AI to give you examples of 15 different error messages for an error that you might encounter on apple.com. I don't know. I'm just making something up to help you kind of involve yourself in different ways. Medium would be to rebuild website pages using Canva or Figma, depending on where you're at in learning design. Hard would be actually creating a personal website. So like yourname.com, samleary.com, for example, where you can get my free UX writing guide. My point, I think in the future, this is kind of an aside, but that personal websites are going to be very important, or even personal applications, although maybe not so much personal applications, but personal websites, super, super important. It's like the 4-dimensional job resume is what it effectively is. So I really encourage people to create a personal website, even if it's just a single page, even if it's, even if you choose not to go the more complicated route like Webflow or WordPress and choose to just stick to Squarespace or Wix, take that initial leap. I'm not saying it's the cheapest thing in the world, but it's a great way to get real world experience in an environment that you have control of, where the stakes are relatively low. So that's real world examples. Practical tools and resources. So provide users with actionable and valuable resources to improve their skills and understanding. So I want to talk about templates, checklists, and resource links. So these 2 images are from my free UX writing guide. If you visit samleary.com, this is the blank questionnaire that I invite people to complete on their own to help them define, maybe it's the UX writing voice for their personal website. Maybe it's for their place of work. I used to work at a small nonprofit that had no brand guidelines, And had I had this tool, it would have really sped up the rate at which we were able to get all of the stakeholders, everybody who is working on the same page, because it allows you the opportunity to define what you're actually looking for, to ask the right questions, and then to collect research, which can, inform the execution, the crystallization of your voice, of your UX writing voice. So templates, the UX writing voice chart, that's what's right here. Super important tool. If you watch my previous videos, you've heard me talk about Tori Podmajewski. Again, still don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. I hope so. I think so. It's a complicated last name. At least it looks like it on the page. Regardless, she worked for Microsoft in the early 2000s, the Xbox 360. The UX writing voice chart is in large part attributed to her. I highly recommend her book, Strategic Writing for UX. I think it's like $20, which isn't cheap necessarily, but for me, it offered a lot of value. There's also the questionnaire. So the questionnaire is really important. If you have access to an audience, to an email list, say, or to an engaged base, let's say, where you have, your most trusted, most loyal customers. For an example would be like a nonprofit's volunteer base. You'd probably be able to distribute the questionnaire to a volunteer base and get reliable answers, answers that can help facilitate decision making, so that it's not just stakeholders sitting around a table like chewing their pencil erasers, making decisions or something, trying to figure out how to create templates that can inform your decision making beyond just the work environment in which the materials are being created in. I hope that makes sense. If not, questions in the comments. So my tip is to seek mechanisms when you're learning new skills. Don't just seek information, seek mechanisms. That's what I'm really trying to do with my free UX writing guide, is to give you mechanisms. Obviously the information is there, but to give you resources that you can complete and tell you the process with which you can complete them. In a future video, I'm going to talk about a couple of different project management philosophies, I'll call them. I've already talked about it at great lengths, but the design thinking process was really helpful in helping me understand how to start in the world of UX writing, so to speak. And then there's Agile and Waterfall, which they both have their pros and cons. I think I prefer Agile, at least right now. It's just what I find to be more beneficial in terms of the projects that I'm working with clients on. So that's an aside, but seeking mechanisms. Information is useless if it's just the information. You need the mechanism to help you contextualize the information. So checklists, standard operating procedures, systems. My experience with checklists, checklists in terms of standard operating procedures. I don't just want a checklist that's like, I don't know. I'm kind of drawing a blank on like a checklist, but it would be like, completing step 1, step 2, step 3. It's like, I need the description, I need the why, and I need it contextualized by everything else that comes after it, not just a simple checkbox. So, templates, checklists, super helpful, but they all have to be contextualized by a larger mechanism. And then resource links, so strategic writing for UX, UX writing resource library, and then UX writing hub. So I'll put all of these, I'll upload all of these to like Google Drive, or maybe I'll do my Patreon or something. I'm thinking that's what I'm gonna do, that's where the slides are gonna live. And I'll make the entry-level pricing as accessible as possible, but that's where you can expect the slides to live, where all of these links are going to be. So keep that in mind, because that's the best book on UX writing I've been able to find. The resource library is really, really good. It is what it sounds like, a resource library. And then UX Writing Hub. That's a great place to go for community, as well as like Reddit, UX Writing, r/UX Writing. That's a good spot too. So expertise, authority, and trustworthiness is what we're talking about now. So establish credibility and enhance the user's confidence in the content. This is generally associated with SEO, but I think it's important. It's important enough that it deserves to be here. SEO, the way expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, or the EAT acronym, is used in SEO is Google search engines, let's say, judge your content according to expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, but also users. You want to position yourself as an expert, as an authority figure, and trustworthy in the space, in the things that you're talking about. So expertise, level of knowledge a writer has in a subject is important. If you're not an expert, if you're like doing UX writing for like fintech, I don't think it's necessarily important that you know everything about the subject. But if you know that you're not an expert in the subject, you need to take the appropriate measures to bridge the gap between what you know and what you don't know, because that's the only way that you create content that is accessible to the widest variety of users. So demonstrated via the writer's ability to use unique terms clearly. When you have to use technical jargon, sometimes it's just inevitable. Car sharing, for example, is a very specific niche down phrase that there isn't really a way around. And it is simplified to the point where, it's car sharing. Those are two simple words. But what it means, you need to make sure, you have to have a working knowledge. You have to communicate it to your user in a way that is frictionless, that is seamless, and amalgamating research, data, and writing. It's putting all of those together. That's why it's so helpful to have a process, which I'll talk about I think it's the next video, if not the one after that. Again, like design thinking, waterfall, agile, all of these important. Authority. So the level of influence a writer has in a field or industry, to some extent it's subjective. I'm not saying every user is thinking about the authority that the writer has, but the point is simply that for the writer to understand that if you're not an authority in the space, you need to go to great lengths to ensure that you understand what you're talking about, that you can effectively, posture as an authority figure so that you can communicate information as simply as possible. The capacity to build a strong personal brand. That's why I really recommend people start by building their own one-page website, because it's going to teach you how to communicate your own brand identity. It's a great little ecosystem for you to practice your UX writing and UX design muscles. So, the way in which, how to leverage knowledge, you find physical communities. The UX Writing Hub is great because you can find a community of UX writers, but the reality is you're not going to find, there's not a UX Writing Hub that lives in every community, even metropolitan community. I'm thinking just in the United States, for example, but also larger areas. The city that I live in does not have a UX writing collective that meets. So when I go to professional spaces, to entrepreneurial spaces, to business organizations that I'm a part of, understanding that what is considered an authority figure what is considered a UX writing authority figure in UX Writing Hub's community is not the same as what would be considered a UX writing authority figure in like your local chamber of commerce, for example. And once you understand that, I think it becomes significantly easier to navigate professional and entrepreneurial spaces as a field expert, as an authority figure. It becomes easier. And then trustworthiness, perceived credibility and reliability of content, as well as the writer, who's ever writing it. The user isn't necessarily going to be thinking about the writer, but what's important is, perceived credibility and reliability. That's part words, part design. I really love this screenshot over here. I think it just works so well. It's like fun, it's cute, it's clean. P2P and B2C, so peer-to-peer and business to consumer, and you see the little car and the mountains, and it's all organized really well. I like it, and to that end, I don't know, I trust it. I would lay down my life for it. Anyways, joke. UX writers, be transparent, honest, and consistent. Brand voice, brand tone, like being very intentional in the decisions, and then relying on systems and sources, making decisions that are informed by users. I have on multiple occasions, this is the way people use r/UX writing. It's like a lot of times if they're not sure what decision to make, you can turn to these online communities and get easy feedback for free from qualified individuals who have years and years of experience. So to that end, relying on sources, relying on systems, etc. Accessibility, guarantee that the content is available and usable by all users regardless of their abilities or devices. There are different formatting options. There's responsive design, inclusive content. W3C, Web Accessibility Initiative. This quote, so important. A lot of people think a lot of different things when they hear accessibility. Accessibility is about, it's essential, when content is accessible. Accessible content is essential for some, but it's useful for all, because again, you're casting the widest net possible and figuring out how to say the things you need to say in a way that can be received by the widest audience possible. That is the work that UX writers are constantly trying to do. So formatting options, accommodating different user preferences. There's compliance, knowing the standards and guidelines, familiarizing yourself with W3C, with the WAI, Web Accessibility Initiative. You know, you don't have to memorize anything, but having some understanding of like what's there, what are the rules, what do I need to know, what's going to help me, you know, connect with the largest audience possible. And then standard operating procedures. You will save so much time, energy, and money if you can create some sort of operating procedure to like guide the creation of accessible content in various formats. It's going to save you a ton of time. And those SOPs in large part already exist, although they can be difficult to find. Responsive design, so accessibility on different devices. This is difficult. It's not easy. It can be very time consuming. Website builders, for example, like Wix, Squarespace, even WordPress, if you use like different plugins, it's becoming easier, but making sure that your content displays well on all devices and being considerate of, okay, what is the likely breakdown of desktop users versus mobile users versus tablet users and different screen sizes, because there are a lot of screen sizes. So can content be resized and reorganized without functionality loss? That's super, super important. And if the answer is yes, then you're good to go. And if it's no, you got to go back to work. You know, you need to use scalable, adaptable design elements at every turn. It's so important for responsive design so that any user on any phone, we're not just talking about the words, we're also talking about how the words are sitting on screens depending on which user is using which screen. So inclusive content, language, clear, concise, easy to understand, limited jargon, slang, and any exclusionary language. Exclusionary can just be, you know, what, again, if 50%, 52% of Americans read below an 8th grade level, then you know, there are certain words that you're just not going to want to use. There are big, long words that you might not want to include in your experience. You want to guarantee all content is free from biases or stereotypes. I don't know what else to say. That's like the way it is. You know, if you're in an experience, like, what do you want me to say? Make it accessible. Make it, leave out the jargon, the slang, exclusionary language. Be empathetic toward your ideal user. Cast a wide net. Updated information. So this kind of goes back to like, you know, the content should be relevant and it should be up to date, providing value to the user over time. The best way to do this is just stay up to date on what are industry best practices. What do different websites do differently? Different applications do differently. So research supported content, industry best practices, and then source references. So I love Duolingo. I love their interface. I just think it's really good. I think it's cute. It's fun. They're so good at gamifying their experience. If you watch my last video, you know, you're about to click out of a learning session. You get the sad little Duolingo bird. Wait, don't go. You're on the right track. If you quit now, you'll lose your progress. Keep learning. I just think that's good. And then 500 plus mobile app design examples. I included this because there are a ton of examples for you to stay up to date on industry best practices. They're always changing. Styles are always evolving, but there's no shortage of resources that are available for free for you. So data should be the prime mover for improving decision making. I was at the Wisconsin Artificial Intelligence Summit in Milwaukee in, I think it was February, and like somebody from, you know, an insurance company, Northwestern Mutual, was like, data is the new oil. And I think that's important, and it's cool, kind of little dystopian, obviously, but the point is just that information is the new oil. So when you're trying to figure out like what works, that's why I really recommend going to the A players, because a lot of times it's the A players who have done the research, who, you know, they have the capital that they can spend to figure out what is going to work and what isn't going to work. And that's what's driving the market. That is why you will eventually see UX writers working at medium and smaller sized companies, which isn't to say that they don't already, but the industry, again, it's in the early stages still. Validate effectiveness of strategy and planning for the future. That's the benefit of research supported content. Industry best practices, you will save time, energy, money, a lot of headaches by, you know, just looking at tested and refined techniques. Again, the A players in the space. So you want to ensure your writing is effective and meets the expected standards. One way to do that, just emulate the best. There's a Picasso quote I really like: good artists copy, great artists steal. So you want to know your niche. The info is out there, regardless of what niche you're working in. Even if you're doing a personal brand, you're trying to build your own 1-page, 2, 3-page website, whatever it might be. Maybe it's 5 pages. Maybe you're feeling crazy and going to do a 5-page personal website, having never done anything before. The information is out there to help you align your, you know, your design, your writing, your content with industry best practices. That's why I'm trying to give you the UX writing questionnaire and the voice chart for free with my guide, so that you have what you need in terms of from a documentation standpoint, to then look at what the best practices are and synthesize best practices with documentation to personalize it to whatever it is that you're working on, be it personal, professional, entrepreneurial, you name it. So source references, learn how to leverage research, even if it's just like in a meeting. Leveraging research, this is kind of an aside, but is super important when you're trying to learn UX writing. You want to cite sources consistently and effectively at every turn when you're making design decisions, even if what you're citing is just research that you collected, or if you didn't collect research, but you know the total accessible market, the total market share for, you know, what it is, the product that you're trying to produce. Making decisions based on research, on numbers, on logistics. That's super important, because it's going to help you create better products, which in turn is going to help you build trust. So thank you so much for watching. That's everything I got. If you liked today's video, if you liked this lesson, this class period, I invite you to subscribe to my channel, follow me on my other socials. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, and visit my website, samleary.com, where you can download my free UX writing guide. So that is everything that I've got today. I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.